Welcome back to America Outdoors Radio. I'm John Kruse. We've got a very special guest for you today who's going to tell you about a very unique hunt. His name is Colin Kearns. He's the editor-in-chief of Field & Stream magazine, and he's got an article coming out in the September edition called Vintage Bucks. It's all about deer hunting in a California wine vineyard. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John.
So, Colin, I've got to ask, how did you stumble on this opportunity?
Well, being the editor at Field & Stream definitely comes with its perks, and this was one of them. So I got this invitation to come out to California last year, and there's this vineyard out in Paso Robles, California, where they're basically the only vineyard that doesn't have a fence around their property. And the reason other vineyards have those fences is to keep deer out. But on this vineyard, Steinbeck Vineyard, just so happens that the family who owns it loves to hunt, and they realized that they had this heaven for deer, basically, this great property, and the deer would come into the vineyards and eat the leaves and stuff like that. And so they thought, why would we leave these deer out when we could hunt them and manage them? And so they have this deal with, some friends where they invite a few hunters each year to come to the property and hunt. And last September, I was one of those lucky hunters, and it was an unforgettable hunt.
Oh, it sounds amazing. I want to dive into this a little bit more, but before we do, I guess we need to make clear, this is not a commercial outfitter or guide. I mean, this is just somebody who's inviting some friends over to take advantage of this very unique hunt.
Exactly, yeah. Unfortunately, it's not something that you can go online and book a hunt. This is just someone inviting you onto their property and taking you out for a deer hunt. So it's exclusive, and that's unfortunate because it's something that I would love for everyone to be able to experience.
So let's talk about the deer themselves. I guess we'll start off with the species. Are we talking muleys? Are we talking whitetails or Columbia blacktail?
Well, that's a good question. It's, kind of depends on who you ask. Everyone out there refers to them as blacktails, but I think technically, biologically, these are coastal mule deer. But, kind of take your pick. But, the locals all refer to them as blacktails, so that's what I refer to them in my story.
And that's how I would too. When in Rome, as they say.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the quality of the hunt. Is this an any sex hunt? Or, do you have some decent bucks, knowing that, blacktails are not known for growing huge racks?
Yeah, so it was for a buck, and these deer, I was surprised by how big some of the deer were. They had some pretty nice mass to their antlers. Some had really big spreads, and my guide, Ryan Newkirk, he was holding out. We only had 2 days to hunt, and we saw a ton of deer, but he wasn't going to just put me on the first buck we saw, and we did make a few stalks on some really nice bucks, but unfortunately these deer were smart, and they've you could tell they've been hunted before and had their own way of getting out of range or breaking up my shot. So the buck I ended up shooting was a nice 2x3, and the best thing about these deer is the meat. That's the real trophy, with any animal, but especially with these ones because their diet is so unique. They're eating the grape leaves of fine wine grapes, and I've never had venison that tastes as good as the venison from the deer I shot.
Oh, sounds absolutely delicious. Now, I know you're not the kind of guy to imbibe before the hunt. I got to ask, though, after the hunt, was there a celebration with a glass or a bottle of wine? And what exactly do you pair a deer with when it comes to wine?
Well, the Steinbecks, they're a wonderful family, and they have this really neat tradition there after a hunt. Whichever section of the property where you shoot your deer, because they've got various patches of different wine grapes like Cabernet, Pinot Noir, and all sorts of other ones. And the patch of grapes where my deer died was in a Zinfandel patch. And so their tradition is after the hunt and that evening, they open up a bottle of wine made from the grapevine where your deer died. So as we were skinning my deer, Ryan's mother, she cooked the deer's liver for us, and they opened up a bottle of Steinbeck Zinfandel, and we all had a glass on the back of a pickup truck and toasted to the hunt, and it was a really neat moment. It was like I just felt like I was part of the family, and it was a great end to the trip.
This sounds like an absolutely wonderful hunt. I want to get back to an aspect of the hunt itself, though. I would imagine hunting deer in a vineyard situation, it gives you some unique challenges that you're not going to find, hunting out in the sagebrush or out in a meadow. I mean, you've got a whole bunch of obstacles in terms of the vineyards themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's very tricky. These deer were really hard to spot. It was a mix of, we did some spot and stalk on the ground, but we also, to just cover the property more efficiently, there was a lot of driving around in the truck at, 1 mile per hour, scanning the vines and just glassing for deer. But, what they would do, they would just nestle up on the edges of these grapevines in the shade. And, the branches of the grapevines can look an awful lot like, a deer antler. And so it was really tricky to spot them. And then, when you would eventually make a stalk, the deer were really good at using the vines to their advantage. It was almost like they would just vanish into these grapevines, and you'd see them 1 second and the next they just disappeared, and you'd run across, the vines to try and see if they were in the next row, and they'd be gone. And so it was a very challenging hunt, but ultimately that's what makes it rewarding.
Oh, absolutely. I've got to ask about the family. I've got to ask about their wine label. Sounds like certainly a winemaker I'd like to support. Tell me more about them.
Yeah, so it's a family vineyard. Steinbeck is the Steinbeck Vineyard is the name of the company, and they're just very down to earth. As Ryan Newkirk, he's the grandson of the owner, Howie. He put it to me best. He's like, look, I don't get caught up in the romanticism of living and working on a vineyard. I'm a farmer. That's what I do. And, that kind of gives you a sense of how they, they're not, snobs or, they're kind of stereotypical wine connoisseurs. They're just down to earth, really hardworking people who happen to make and produce some really delicious wines. And you can order their wines on their website, and they're not the cheapest, but they're certainly, not super expensive. And I couldn't recommend it enough. They're great family and great wine.
So just Google Steinbeck wines and you're going to find it?
Yeah, you'll find it.
All right. Well, again, this sounds like a really unique hunt. I can't wait to dive into the article in the September issue of Field and Stream magazine. We got about a minute left. What else are you excited about coming up in this month's edition of Field and Stream?
Well, this was a fun issue because it's like this was, it's hunting season now. And so this issue is just packed with all sorts of stories about the fall and fall hunts. And the name of our cover story, it's called Opening Day in America. And it's 20 pages of hunting tips from every region of the country, the East, the South, the Midwest, and the West, for birds, big game, small game, you name it. And it's just kind of a celebration of opening day, which at Field and Stream we think of as kind of like a national holiday. There's hunting tips, but there's also essays about just the traditions of opening day, spending time outside with your friends and family. And so it's a great issue, and I'm really proud of it, and I hope you like it too.
Sounds like a can't-miss edition to me. Again, it's a September issue of Field and Stream magazine. Look for it wherever you buy magazines, at stores or anywhere else. And don't forget to read this great story called Vintage Bucks about deer hunting in a California wine vineyard. Colin, thanks for sharing this with us today on America Outdoors Radio.
Thanks, John.